Hey everyone, this is Derek with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today I just want to do a quick video with you to explore a concept that I've been mentioning recently over the last few videos. It's a topic that I'm discussing in the form of decentralized environmentalism, and we're going to talk all about that in just a moment. I want to remind you guys first, though, to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com. As you can see, the website is fully up to date and loaded with all of our most recent content videos, essays, vlogs, and everything you want to keep up with. So please bookmark the website, follow us on Minds, Steemit, Discord, join our text list, follow us on BitChute. If you want to support, you can do so via Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can also sign up for our email newsletter. So I've been discussing in recent videos, we've been discussing kind of the environmental movements, the current movement, and how it's being used to push more government control, and ideas like this. You saw this video report recently, 11,000 scientists call for population control as the sort of solution, or at least one potential solution for climate change and just global climate catastrophe. I also, during my mayoral campaign, I mentioned to you guys that I had spoke at a high school, and I got to hear some students who were very bright and young, but had obviously been told and received and believed the message that if they didn't do something in the next 12 years, or if the adults didn't do something, then their world was coming to an end, and basically they were sort of having a existential crisis about what's the point of living or going to school if we're just going to die in the next 20 years or whatever, if the world's going to go to crap. And we've been exploring this concept, and I know many of you are rightfully skeptical of the environmental movements out there, because most of them are just pushing Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, United Nations, what I would consider propaganda that's more about control. Now, the problem, though, is when many of you start to kind of question and wake up to the faux environmental movement, you tend to throw out all environmentalism out the window, or throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and it seems like there's a complete misunderstanding, or even just a lack of interest and trying to understand how we can take care of the environment and the planet while also still maintaining and respecting individual rights and individual liberties and things of that sort. So we're going to talk a little bit about that concept. One other thing I want to mention is that I've been watching the documentary that I purchased from my friends Aaron and Melissa at TruthStream Media, because I want to support independent media. You can see right here it says I own this because I paid for it. I paid the $2 to support them for their work. They put together this hour and 42-minute documentary called The Myth of Extinction. It's just released on November 17th. And this is their kind of take of going into the current environmental movement, specifically the group Extinction Rebellion, and how this group is being pushed out there and promoted quite often, and these climate strikes are being promoted quite often. And it's something that should immediately set off alarm bells, that if there's a movement that's being promoted by the mainstream and you see lots of money and organization that pops up overnight, that should set off some alarms that it's probably not truly a grassroots movement, because most of the actual grassroots movement, they get ignored by the corporate media especially. But instead, there have been lots of reports about Extinction Rebellion and about the climate strikes and the Greta Thunberg and all that sort of stuff. So there is an extreme push towards propagandizing people to thinking that the answer is to go after the individual. And I've only watched a little bit of this documentary, but once I finish it, I'm actually going to do a review specifically about this documentary, because I can already tell there's good stuff in here. But I do think that, as I was saying a moment ago, that even Aaron and Melissa in this documentary are kind of falling short of seeing that you can talk about the environmental movement and talk about changing the world and protecting the planet and living in harmony with it without being some kind of like extremist, fascist, eco-fascist, or a cult government worshiper. And I think there's some interesting stuff in the documentary. We'll get into that in the whole other video, but I do think we need to take a new look at this. So if you have been one of those people who up to this point have just generally assumed only lefties and Democrats and liberals care about the environment, those of us on the right, or the conservatives or the Republicans or whatever you label to yourself, you're too good for the environmental movement, or that's just not something you care about. I want you to understand you can care about the environment, and it doesn't have to involve government. In fact, if you are right-leaning or more conservative, you might come from families who have a history of growing up on farms, or working in the fields and things of that sort in the past. And that is what I'm talking about, is talking about building a movement that can be based on individual empowerment and collective action. So what I mean by that is individuals empowering themselves, waking up to the fact that we need to take care of the planet because we need to leave it for the coming generations, the 7 generations and beyond, so that they have something to live and thrive in. But also realizing that, hey, I can't do this alone. We have to do this collectively. But again, when you hear that word collective, that doesn't mean immediately government force, United Nations, loss of individual liberties. It just means that people voluntarily choose to come together. And for me, this is centered around the concept of permaculture. And you can just do a search. Here's a CIA Google search of permaculture. You can go to Wiki, read the permaculture there. You can read here about what are the 12 principles of permaculture. And it's a really extremely interesting philosophy that is going to become and more integral into my life as the years pass on. And in fact, I've been reporting on it since 2014. I'll show you just some of the videos we've done. Stephen Brooks, who's the founder of the Envision Festival and several intentional communities, we interviewed him last year about permaculture, Envision Fest, and building community. I also interviewed Sarah Wu, who's a permaculture teacher, herbalist, and also involved in the Envision Festival, about permaculture and her connection to the earth and through healings. And she, even she chooses to call herself a witch. And the interesting thing is, I know that Aaron and Melissa would hear that and be like, oh my God, this is a part of the occult's environmental movement to turn children into witches. And because I think they're coming from more of a Christian conservative perspective than I personally am. And I'm not talking shit about it. I'm just saying I think we're coming from different backgrounds on that. And I even asked Sarah why she chooses to identify as a village witch or a wise woman, and you can hear all about that. Then I did this one, which is based on a chapter out of my book, and it's called Permagora, the synthesis of permaculture and agorism. And this is first an interview with Eric McCool, who's a permaculture farmer and activist, who's the first guy that actually got me thinking about this concept of Permagora, and then it ended up becoming a chapter from my book, and you can check out that interview and find out more about that. And then, of course, for anybody who really wants this link, I will share it with you. I have this. This is the Inhabit a Permaculture Perspective documentary that I screen recorded, and I highly recommend finding this documentary or just reach out to me and I'll send you the link. It shows you how permaculture can work within the urban environment, within the rural environment, and the countryside, and within the city, and within the suburbs. And it's really beautiful. So permaculture basically is about rethinking the way we grow our food, but also rethinking about the way that we organize and design our lives. And going back to 2014, I did this interview. You can see this if you want to watch it. It's a very extremely old interview. One of the first ones I did when I first launched the Conscious Resistance Live with my buddy, a musician, yoga teacher, and meditation instructor, and permaculture activist. His name is Tyagaraja. And this is episode number 7 of the Conscious Resistance Live. So way back then, I was already talking to people about permaculture, and he talked about regenerative activism, and it's a really informative interview. I really recommend you check that out. But my point here with the basics of this permaculture is that permaculture, as this definition says, is a set of design principles centered on whole systems thinking, so holistic thinking, simulating or directly utilizing the patterns and resilient features observed in natural ecosystems. It uses these principles in a growing number of fields, from regenerative agriculture, rewilding, and community resilience. So Bill Mollison is one of the, considered the father of permaculture and one of the first people who wrote the book about permaculture. And again, it simply is about rethinking the way that you work with the planet and the way that you design your life. And just one basic example, you have different zones in permaculture, and zone 1 is going to be the foods that are going to be closest to you, that need to be tended to every day and taken care of. Zone 2, things maybe need to be watered once every couple of days, and on until you got like zone 4 or 5, and those are the trees and things that take care of themselves and they don't have to be messed with much at all. So, and the other thing is about studying the natural ecosystems. When it comes to permaculture, you would look at a piece of land and try to understand it, and when it rains, where does the water collect and flow, and understand those natural ecosystems and work with them instead of just coming in and tearing up the earth and things of that sort. So what I promote is an environmentalism that is based on decentralization. I'm talking about decentralizing and localizing the food production system, because those of you out there, if you're not growing your own food, and I'm currently not, then you're dependent on the grocery store. And I am at the moment. I've got some backup supply of food, but I don't have my own garden anymore at the moment. I've had several different community gardens and been involved in all kinds of stuff like that in the past, and I'm going to in the near future as well. But if we're dependent on the grocery stores, that means we're dependent on it coming from California, Mexico, etc. And let's say there's a drought and the food doesn't make it out there, or there's some cartel gang, shooting down in Mexico, and so the avocados can't make it up to your store, and then all of a sudden there's a scarcity on avocados and the prices go up, and there's all these unforeseen circumstances, not to mention the environmental impact of shipping and driving food across the country just so that we can make sure we have avocados or watermelons or whatever the heck we want whenever we want it. It's a very weak centralized system, not to mention that a lot of these industrial factory farming farms and the people who benefit from this system, they often get subsidies from the government. So you're working with people who are being benefited and propped up by the government, by the state. You're centralizing your food and your local food economy, and you're becoming dependent, and that's never a good move. So becoming, I think, more environmentally involved, and the reason I talk about growing your own food, getting involved in community gardens, urban farms, things of that sort, is because this is going to build more independence. And I thought a lot of those out there who identify as patriots or truthers or this kind of thing, and anarchists and what have you, that you care about independence and personal responsibility. So again, you can live in harmony with the planet. You can give respect, pay respect to the earth and to the planet without turning into some kind of environmental cult, eco-fascist movement that says taxing the heck out of people and putting government in charge is the answer. And here's one example. I interviewed my buddy Rob Greenfield way back in January of this year on his zero waste lifestyle, urban foraging, and veganism, and he just kind of shares his opinions there. But one of the things I want to tell you about Rob is that I love about him and appreciate about him. I know that we don't necessarily see everything eye to eye when it comes to politics, but I know that he cares about the environment, and he's not out there lobbying for the government to be in charge or pass laws. He's just saying, look, I'm going to live in these quote-unquote extreme ways and do these different stunts to try to get people thinking about how they can take more action in their lives. And that's, I think, always going to be a good thing, because it's encouraging people to think, it's encouraging action, and it's not saying, yeah, the government's the answer. So again, my point here is that when you talk about permaculture, you talk about decentralization and localization of the food supply and building local food economy, and you talk about people like Rob Greenfield who are out there pushing for change, and people like Stephen Brooks who aren't calling for government as the solution. These are great examples of people who are doing good things. Even there's a young man by the name of Boyan Slot. I think we might have, let me see if I still got this on the website. I interviewed him years ago. Unfortunately, we lost the interview, but I did do a report on him, and he was trying to clean up the oceans, and I think he still is. See, I did this report, but without the government, who will clean up the oceans? About a young man who's under 20 years old at the time, starting this project to clean up the Pacific garbage patch, and he was having some success, and things like this are continuing on. But again, not asking the government to do it, and how's the government going to solve this? Just deciding to be a private individual who goes out there and takes action to try to help the planet. I have my friend Daniel, let me see if I can find it, Beach Cleanup. It's a guy I met in Spain last year who is out there just cleaning up the beaches of Spain. Barcelona, cleaning up plastic from Barcelona's beaches. His name is Dan of Plant Powered Travel, and I don't know what he's involved now at the moment, but I know he's still out there kicking butt. And he's just cleaning up pounds and pounds of plastic from the beaches. Again, not asking the government to save the day or to pass a law or things like that. Maybe he also does that, but I know that for the most part, his work is driven by his own passion and his own action of getting involved and taking action. So Rob Greenfield, Stephen Brooks, Dan from Plant Powered Travel, these are people who care about the environment. And again, they might fully buy into the man-made global warming, climate engineering, United Nations story. But that doesn't mean I can't hang out with them. That doesn't mean that we can't collaborate and work together. And in fact, although I'm very skeptical of that, I think most people assume that I believe in man-made climate change just because I'm out there doing good things and because I care about the environment. But I don't buy fully into it. I don't trust the UN, and I don't trust all the science. I don't think that there's a consensus, and I don't think that things are settled. But that doesn't mean we should just say, yeah, so let's just pollute, let's just not care about the environment, let's not take any action. I think that means that it's up to each of us who give a shit to make an effort to show people that, yeah, humanity has done some fucked up things and continues to do fucked up things, and people in different parts of the world are very absent-minded, and they don't have a culture of recycling and things like of that sort, and of just taking care of it. But I think it's up to us to change that. And so instead of preaching this message that humanity is the problem, and so we need to be exterminated, or we need to be limited, or we need to be taxed, or we need to have our privileges taken away, why not say, let's get proactive, let's take some personal responsibility, and let's come together and change the planet for the better. Let's work with the environment. And my grandmother, who is in her mid-80s and has grown up on farms her entire life, when I first started getting involved in community gardens and traveling and working on farms back in 2011, she told me, when you start getting involved in gardening and growing your own food, you're going to get closer to God. And she specifically said, I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about God. And I remember telling her that I was already experiencing that. I was already having this profound experience of getting closer to the soil and to the earth and to the food, and just the ability to plant a seed and to water it and to tend to it and take care of it, and then watch it fruit and turn and just flourish, and then take that and then feed myself and feed my friends, and then take the seeds and then save those for the next season. I mean, such a powerful, beautiful experience. And that is where I take inspiration from people like that who've been growing their own food and taking care of themselves their whole lives without asking government for anything. And I think that's the way forward. So onward towards a decentralized environmentalist movement. Till next time, guys, you are powerful, you are beautiful, you are free. Peace.